All right. Well, joining me now live here in Lviv is Michael Bociurkiw, who's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thanks for joining us. We were speaking earlier, and you argue that there's a need for not just an overall fly zone, but potentially a humanitarian no-fly zone over some parts of Ukraine. How would that work?
Yeah, absolutely, because I don't think we see the political will right now for the West to do a complete no-fly zone over Ukraine. So let's look at past history where in other theaters of war, I think this was done where you have a humanitarian no-fly zone over a certain part of the country. In this case, Western Ukraine, where there are a lot of internally displaced people here seeking shelter and protection. And I think that would come across, I think, to the West and to Mr. Putin as less of a confrontation, that this is purely for humanitarian reasons. But whether, again, the political will is there in the West is difficult to tell.
Because you'd have to enforce it.
It would have to be enforced. But, you know, the other thing is Mr. Zelensky is still also pressing for those Polish MiG jets to come here. And I'd also argue, Hala, is that what's the difference between providing lethal weaponry and these jets? I mean, it's already, the precedent is there as well. But I'm getting very worried that, again, the West does not have the ability or the willingness to come to Ukraine's assistance. And I think the feeling I'm getting from a lot of people here is that we are pretty much in this alone, and we're protecting, you know, the NATO's eastern flank. And I think what you're going to see is more and more kind of micro alliances with neighboring countries who also feel threatened by Mr. Putin.
Do you think there's any hope right now at this stage in those talks that Russia and Ukraine are conducting? Because we're hearing from Lavrov sort of the beginning of we're getting the sense from him that there may be some overlap where there was none a few days before. Same with Zelensky. Any hope on that front, do you think?
I think the Russians like to project a bit of a diplomatic front that, yes, we're talking, yes, we understand, yes, we're going to negotiate over this and that. But I know from my own time here with the OSCE, I was here in 2014, 2015. We had multiple talks with the Russian-backed thugs in Donetsk and also, you know, representatives from Moscow. And each time a ceasefire was negotiated, it was broken shortly afterwards. There's a pattern of lying in deceit on the Russian side, and I don't think we should expect anything less right now.
It's a bit of a different situation only in the sense that here the Russians are certainly not performing the way they had hoped. Their ground advances have stalled. They're starting to use crude aerial bombardments on clearly marked civilian targets. I mean, what does that tell you about what their intentions are? Yeah,
their intentions are to throw everything they have, and these crude missiles are the same ones they also use in Donetsk. We call them kind of stupid missiles. They're not guided, and they land anywhere, but most of the time in populated centers with maximum damage. So it will be a kind of scorched earth policy, sad to say, and then perhaps they'll retreat. But it's very sad what we're about to see, I think, happen to more civilian deaths and destruction. And then, of course, it's going to push more people out of the country in the short to medium term. We're probably looking at upwards of 10 million, which is a quarter of the Ukrainian population.
What could, at this stage, make Putin retreat, turn back, stop this insane war?
China. I think that's the only leverage the West has left with Mr. Putin, is to put pressure on Beijing. Because don't forget, China also has interests here, economic interests. Before the violence began, President Zelensky called China their closest economic partner. A lot of energy and food security for China depends on Ukraine. Not entirely, but part of it. So I don't think they want to see Ukraine destructed or Ukraine totally in Russian hands. So that's the only space I think we have left, sadly.
And do you think that the willingness is there on China's part right now or not?
Hard to say. I think at the moment they're playing a waiting game, watching what's happening, because don't forget, this is, of course, a lesson for Xi Jinping when it comes to Taiwan.
Yeah.
I think the stomach of the Chinese dragon is growling right now, looking at Taiwan and seeing what's happening here. But at the same time, I think China has a sense of pragmatism in it, that there's economic energy interests here that need to be protected.
But also it can't be happy that this is really disrupting what it hoped would be its post-COVID economic recovery. And this is really driving commodity prices up. They're so sensitive to those commodity prices.
Yes.
I wonder at what point does China come in and say, and what could they say? Because By some accounts, Putin is delusional right now. He doesn't even realize how badly his army is suffering on the ground in some cases, and how some of his tanks and helicopters are getting shot out of the sky. Can China even do anything at this stage?
I think that trip of Putin to Beijing during the Olympics was very important, and I would think that this was discussed and that he was given sort of an okay to come here, but I don't think neither of them thought it would go that badly for Russia and this long. I think only a few days. And I think the thinking then was to maybe grab key interests in that land bridge, for example, between Russia and Crimea to establish that. But they seem to be intent on keeping on going, and again, more death and destruction.
Michael Bociurkiw, thank you very much for joining us here live in Lviv. We're going to take